welcome to Speaking of Excellence, the official podcast of the Quality Professionals Awards for Further Education and Employability. My name's Sally Forsyth, I'm the Marketing Manager at Mesmer and also the Quality Professionals Awards, and I'm delighted to say that I'm now also a podcast producer for Speaking of Excellence. Mesmer founded the Quality Professionals Awards in 2024 to shine the spotlight on the unsung heroes of quality and compliance in FE and employability. In this episode, we talk to 3 leaders who have taken their organisation on a journey of improvement. Our guests discuss what they have learnt through transforming the quality of education within their own organisations. You'll hear examples of specific strategies they've used, and they talk candidly about the challenges and some of the setbacks. Thanks so much to Sarah, Ranjit and Lee for being part of it, and thanks also to IEP and OAL who are headline partners of the Quality Professionals Awards. The awards will take place in June 2025. If you head over to qualityprofessionalsawards.org, you'll get all the information about nominations, sponsorship, judges and the event itself. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Do let us know what you think in the comments.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you all?
Good, thank you, Lou. How are you?
I'm very, very well, thank you. Sarah, we have to say, for anyone who's watching this on YouTube, that we are particularly impressed by the fact you have all of your awards behind you. And really, I feel like we should make Lee and Ranjit go and collect theirs. So, so we've all got our awards with us.
Well, I've tidied up my notice board.
I'm going to be honest with you, I could tell. Yes. I could tell that you tidied up the notice board, possibly even put the plant behind you to add a little bit of greenery. Yeah. And Ranjit's hidden a load of boxes that were behind him before as well.
Just get the right angle.
Let me tell our audience a bit about who we've got with us today, and then what I'm going to get you to do is introduce yourselves with a specific question, if that's okay. So we have Lee Lister from Northumberland College as part of Education Partnership North East. I'll let Lee say hello in a moment. We have Ranjit Singh from Hull College Group, and we have Sarah Burrows from PMA, and I'll get you to unpick that in a moment. But you wear other hats as well, Sarah, so you can say more about those. You don't have to limit it if you don't want to. So I'm going to start with Lee, and let's introduce ourselves with a bit of a purpose. So Lee, the question is, tell us about your job now, but actually more interestingly, how you got to it. So a kind of potted history of your leadership journey to date, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. So I've been in further education now for 34 years. I've previously worked in the Yorkshire and Humber, now work in the North East, work for Education Partnership North East. Campus Principal is my current role, looking after the land-based provision, but I've also got cross-college group responsibility for special educational needs and disabilities. Started off as a technician back in the day, 34 years ago, quickly evolved into teaching, middle leadership, and then latterly in the last 10 years, senior leadership, sitting on the current executive leadership team at EPNE. My passion is education, driving change for young people and adults to impact positively on their life, and that drives everything that we do, and I do personally as well.
Thank you, Lee. It's lovely. Go on then, Sarah, beat that.
Oh, I'm not as long in the sector. Obviously younger, Lee, you know.
Much younger. Much younger.
No, coming up for 25 years in the sector, further education. Had the pleasure of working in numerous colleges, rated as grade 1 outstanding to grade 4 inadequate. Love education. I'm genuinely and passionate about it. I think education changes lives, and there's no other sector that I'd like to be in ever. And that's sort of my potted history. I've worked in further education colleges and currently a training provider, and I've also got my own company as well. So I do freelance work in the sector.
Thank you, Sarah. And last but of course not least, Ranjit.
I've been in the education sector since 2000, and I've worked my way up from a lecturer. So I've worked in Milton Keynes, Nottingham, Burton. Then I went to London, worked in 3 colleges in London, and now I'm the vice principal of quality learner experience at Hull College. And in between that time as well, I've also done a stint as an Ofsted inspector for 3 years. And like Lee, I think that the biggest motivation driver for me is making difference to all students and their lives, making sure we get better outcomes, which has been quite a big push in the current role that I'm in Hull College.
Thank you. And I can't wait to unravel that actually. So we have something in common. And I was saying to you guys just before we started recording, you were chosen for this particular one for a reason because of the content of what we're talking about today. And in our different ways, the four of us have experienced a journey, if you like, which I hate using that term, but I've done it now, from provision that perhaps isn't meeting the standards that we would want it to, either in our current roles or in previous roles, and getting it to a point where it meets or exceeds those standards and is being recognised in the various ways, within the sector in the way that things get recognised for that. And that's the reason that you're here, because from your different perspectives, I think you've got so much that other people could learn from. But we have a tendency to overly focus on the kind of high end of provision, and that can feel a little bit far for some providers of all types to reach, instead of perhaps sometimes meeting us when it hasn't been so good and us being able to resonate and tell them about the journey that we've gone through. So that's what I want to talk to you about, if that's okay. And Lee, I asked a question of you about what were the things that you would want to get across today, and you said something that I thought we'd start with. And you said there are no two organisations the same. You simply can't lift your approach to improving quality from one and superimpose it onto another. I'd love it if you could start by unpicking that for us, and then Sarah, Ranjit, feel free to come in, whenever you'd like to within that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something I do firmly believe in because having worked in numerous colleges previously, the culture in colleges is very different, and understanding the timing, the balance, and the perspective of where you are working is key to implementing any quality change. So, for example, I introduced a gold standard induction, which reduced attrition and improved retention in colleges, but actually lifting that from one organisation to another organisation, it had to be nuanced. It had to understand, the people had to be on board with what that looked like and felt like in terms of an outcome, B, the communication around it, and the strategy used to embed it in the organisation. And I'm pleased to say we have done it exceptionally well at EPNE, and we did get really good metrics from that. But understanding the culture, the timing, who to be involved, who your change agents are in that process is really key to implementing anything. And understanding where an organisation is culturally is key to implementing any quality improvement or change moving forward.
Thank you. It's a great start. Sarah, let's get down to, kind of the brass tacks of it. So PMA got itself into a little bit of bother, in the early days of apprenticeships, and had that really difficult time where in your first monitoring visit, pre-first full inspection, it didn't go so well. And you and I met actually at that point in time, so I feel like I've walked that journey, if you like, alongside you. So if you pick up the mantle of Lee's point around a culture of quality and what that looks like and how you transitioned that provision to where it is now, take over from Lee and tell us a bit more about what that means in your world.
Yeah, so in my world, sort of April 2021, PMA had received an insufficient judgment in the first Ofsted monitoring visit. That meant an immediate stop on starts. So for a provider where over 60% of their income was ESFA funding, this was obviously significant. I came to work at PMA. I was approached by the chair of governors and the two directors to maybe come and do some freelance to help them out on a short-term basis, maybe one day a week. So in June 2021, I started there. It was clear straight away, despite them having other successful revenue streams coming into the business, they had to make critical decisions. Firstly, did they want to carry on in the apprenticeship arena? Because for being such a successful business in other areas, to them being told, no, you're not actually making progress at all in this arena, they had to make really difficult decisions. And obviously, knowing income was impacted because of the ESFA decision to stop the starts. So, in a way, it was a little bit. Even though when I look back, it was obviously really challenging. It was a bit easier for me because the decision had been made by the chair of governors and the directors. No, we have to make this a success, and this is integral to our business. But then it was sort of, and here it goes, over to you. What do we need to do to get to where we need to get to? And we all knew we had to get to a grade 2 good to be able to continue with what we wanted to do. So it was sort of a bit of a everybody was shouldering the responsibility of what was going to happen next, because people knew, if we didn't get a successful grade at Ofsted, then the company potentially would just close that area of work. So in a way it was easy, because it was up to myself and a colleague who went into support to shape the culture and climate of the organisation, because historically that hadn't been in place. So we were able to say, okay, well, this is where we need to get to. This is where we know we're at currently. We know quality isn't there. There was nothing in the report, the monitor and visit report, that we didn't agree with. In fact, if we're being honest, some of the reasonable progress judgments that have been made, when we did a bit more digging, we thought that was pretty generous. So we were able to sort of start with that mantle of, okay, high expectations from now on in, quality at the centre of everything we do, the learner and the learner needs at the centre of everything we do. And actually the whole way through, we had an idea that it would be high challenge, low threat. So we needed to fix everything, and we needed to fix everything really quickly. But what we didn't want to do was offend anybody, or, we wanted to be fair, we wanted to be kind and authentic and all of those things. But actually what we also knew is we needed to do better for the learners and the employers and the stakeholders. So we were able to say, the reason we're saying high challenge, low threat is because nobody is going to get sacked for having a different opinion to us. But we've got high expectations, and we need to be in a position where we're moving things really quickly. So we haven't got time for sort of sitting down, oh, what, you did that 2 years ago and it worked then, did it? That we didn't have the time. So it was very much, this is the line we need to get to quickly. How are we all going to work together to get there? So we developed our own culture and climate. So that was a quite nice position to be in. And Lee mentioned earlier about change agents. We quickly sort out who those change agents would be, because you spot straight away who is on the bus and who's in the right seat and who needs to get off the bus. And because we had that sort of permission to move things quickly, we were able to put processes and procedures in place quickly as well to get people on board. And if you keep going back to the high expectations are to ensure the learners get the very best possible outcome, nobody can really argue with you on that point, because it's all about the learner. And that's what we've always said all the way through. Any decision we make, what is the positive impact on the learner? And if it isn't going to have one, why are we making that decision?
Yeah, it's a great point. I see lots of nodding from Ranjit and Lee around that. So, Ranjit, would it be fair to say when you went into the college, you didn't have that luxury of essentially coming in and being able to do it from ground up? And a bit like Lee, I guess, you're coming into a predetermined culture, if you like, that you're then having to make some adjustments and changes to in order to get it to where you want it to be. Talk to us a bit about when you joined Hull, what you found, if you like, and how you've been able to make such a significant change to where you guys are now.
Yeah, when I joined, it was August 2021, and everybody knows the headlines and negative headlines around Hull College. At the time, we were on the 7th principal in 2.5 years, and since then, it then soon became 8 in 3. So that signifies all the change at the start and at the top. The other thing it had was an Ofsted RI. They had a £50 million bailout from the government, 2017-18, and 231 jobs had gone at that point as well. And what Lee said at the start was true, because I'd come from London College at West Thames, where we did a deep dive process, which was very judgmental and very performance driven. But when I joined this college, first of all, I got through the process and had to convince the chair and the CEO at the time of the way forwards. And we brought in, I'd say, very stringent measures, but it was all ungraded and very developmental. But exactly like we just said as well, it's around the support and challenge. So we were giving lots and lots of challenge, but without the threat of anybody losing jobs. There's no restructures, but it was quite full on. At the time, there was myself, another vice principal who's curriculum, and we had an interim principal, and didn't really have a senior team. And gradually we added them, and it's become a big SMT now. But initially, we went from 0 observations the previous year to myself and 2 other colleagues doing over 300 in year 1. Up until Christmas, everything we were looking at in study programs was pretty much inadequate. And we got the call in February, so very early for this team, and we managed to get high needs apprenticeships and adults as a good, but it was an RI overall, which is the best possible grade for the college. And when we had our monitoring the following year, we got good feedback for our 16 to 18 provision, which wasn't strong, But that's the first time Ofsted had said anything positive about 16 to 18 provision since 2008, and the college was outstanding. So it's a massive change. But I think the way that we conducted ourselves and the teams with the staff was quite tricky because of the change and churn at the top. None of the managers or the teachers were fully aware or educated in what the new framework and what the requirements were, not just in Ofsted, in HE and all the other regulatory framework. So it was really tricky, but I think we had to educate, support, but then be really clear on where we needed to get to. But we were realistic. So in the first year, we wanted to hit the bottom end of a good, then get to good with outstanding features, and then become outstanding. And we're about a year ahead of that at the moment, so it's good. But and obviously it culminated in our Ofsted inspection last year. But it was around the culture. That's the key part, I think. And because we weren't in there and threatening and saying that this is what's going to happen if that doesn't go right, it doesn't matter. It was all around how we did it. And I think that's created the trust and the transparency.
Yeah, you've actually taken the word out of my mouth there about what comes across in, and I know some of you really well, you know, and some of you getting to know actually as of last year. And I think what always strikes me in what you've done and the things that I even see about you from afar is that sense of trust really is writ large in what you do. How do you build a trusting relationship with your staff? And that means the messages aren't always positive, but actually they're done in the spirit of how do we collectively make a difference? And Lee, I wonder, you've got a particular nuance that I think's useful to pick up on, because although other people might not go through a merger situation, sometimes we're bringing teams together who culturally come at things from different places. So you joined before the merger with Sunderland College, Northumberland College and Hartlepool. Where did you fit within that, if you like? And what did you notice about how those messages fit when you're trying to bring three different organisations essentially under one umbrella?
And I think going back to a couple of things that have been said previously by Ranjit and Sarah and yourself, Lou, in terms of when you look at change and quality improvement, communication has got to be clear, it's got to be transparent, and it's got to be really clear. And knowing the teams of people that you work with, knowing who are your change agents, those that aren't going to really extend any exponential effort but will do their job, but also knowing the ones you do need to have a conversation with and say, actually, this is the journey we're going on. Do you want to be part of it? Because I'd love you to be, but actually this is what's going to happen going forward. And having those really honest, authentic conversations with people builds trust, absolutely builds trust. But then when I joined EPNE, I joined just after merger with Northumberland. So Sunderland College merged with Hartlepool Sixth Form, and then subsequently, I think 2 years later, merged with Northumberland College. All colleges were at a very different position in relation to their history, their legacy, their Ofsted grades, their financial status, all of that, and actually building a community through communities of practice and setting some very, very clear expectations. What is the strategy of this organisation going forward? What is the vision? How are the senior leaders going to work with their respective teams underneath them, and all talk the same language, all talk the same outcomes, all talk the same expectations of every individual? It has to be values based. It has to be real, authentic, honest conversations about where each college is at, where they need to get to, and how collectively as an organisation now we're going to move that forward, because we are now one college.
How do you balance that? You kind of used the word, Ranjit, you know, about bringing things in that, you know, we're really stringent. I don't think you quite used that word, but that was the point you were making, that we still have to have really clear standards in terms of what we're trying to do. And Lee, your point being we're unwavering about those standards. I wonder if and let me come to you actually, Randy. There is something always for leaders to manage between. How do you set that expectation and still allow people autonomy to innovate, to create, to be able to, you know, bring about new ideas? And I just wonder, what have you learnt on your leadership journey about how you get the balance of those two things in place? We're really clear and fixed-minded, if you like, about where we want to get to, but still creating that space for people to, you know, do things that allow them to not feel like they're being stifled, if that makes sense as a very long-winded question.
Yeah, I think the first thing on that one would be, so when I join, say something's failing or isn't performing, it's being as a sign of respect to staff, you have to be really, really good at making accurate judgments. One thing that I don't like is you get some people in quality who'll go in and just say the wrong thing or do that member of staff incorrectly with the feedback, and a head of department might get feedback which is inaccurate. So the first thing is we have to be, so the teams I'm with have to be well trained and they have to know exactly what they're talking about, find the evidence and be able to justify what they're saying and why they're saying it. Then it's about training them, making sure that they're really, really clear on how to get to where you want them to, because you can set expectations, but if people don't know how to get there, then it's pretty pointless. And I think and then once that's in place and you start getting incremental improvements, that's when people buy in. So because if this is where we were, this is what we've done, now we've moved it. And it's just that continual process then tends to have people that are more, even the reluctant ones, once they start seeing some traction, they're soon on board. And then I think the key thing around it is around educating the staff, which is something we had to do a lot at Hull, especially with the management group, is these are the standards and this is how we're going to do them. But then to push it to a 1, that's the next stage. It's around, so everybody knows how to get to a 2, a 1, but then the 1 is more when it's unique and there's individual selling points and they're allowed a bit of flair. And once they hit the one thing we've never said is we want to be a good college. It's always been outstanding. So there's a bit of a blurring of the lines. There's no RI good. It's just we want to be an outstanding college and that's it. And to be outstanding, you do have to be quite unique and different.
Yes,
and we've
yes.
got a few departments now that are starting to, we've given a few outstanding grades, which is pleasing, but they've done that themselves. It's not us. We've put the framework in place, but then they push and excel, and some of them are award winning. It's great. But that's then links back to the culture as well. They know they're getting a fair deal from us. We're giving them clear feedback, clear training. Then it's down to them to make sure that the work happens.
Yeah. Sarah,
And
when
I
was...
think I was just
Go on,
going to
Lee,
say,
you
Lou,
go. You
I
go.
think Ranjit's absolutely right. You will never get outstanding with a compliance culture because actually you absolutely need people to innovate. You need people in a safe space to try new things. A fear of no blame if something goes wrong, for example, in lesson visits. If something goes wrong with IT, but they're trying something new, celebrate that and support them. So I think that's a really important point.
I
Thank
think
you.
as
Go
well
on,
for
Sarah.
us, we were relentless. We knew we had to be, and we didn't have a big amount of time to change things around. But we were also aware that we weren't heroes. We don't know everything, and we knew we'd have to rely on the team that we had to bring that skill set in and all do it together in collaboration, because we couldn't have just come in and enforced it on people. We knew we had to work with people and through people to get the outcome that we needed to get. But once you get that groundswell and they know what the expectations are and they know what your goal is and your vision and your drive and your determination is to get to, as Lisa knew, people get behind you, and you get people then who they're keen to do it for themselves, and then you're not pushing them as much. You find that at first you're dragging, then you're alongside, and then you don't have to push because they run for themselves. And that's just a fantastic position to be in when you get them coming to you saying, oh, should we do this and should we do that? And what about this idea I've had? And you're like, absolutely, run with it. That's yours, and they do it really well because they've had that confidence built up, because there has been that no fear, there's no idea off the table. Even if you've tried it 2 or 3 years before and it's not worked as well, maybe now the timing's different and it will work, or maybe the ideas we had that time we need to just get rid of and just start new. And it's just all about that generation of ideas all the time and listening to people and genuinely being authentic, letting them have a say, and if something isn't going to work, explaining why it isn't going to work. But yeah, I think getting the team to believe in what you want to do and them actually taking the ownership of it themselves is just beautiful.
What was the moment, Sarah, when you moved from that, I think you called it the drag, to working alongside, and at that moment when it felt like you were dragging people with you to that point where you maybe sat down and thought, oh my God, we're making some actual progress now. What can you remember what that was and how you knew that it had changed?
Yeah, I'm making it sound really easy now, and it wasn't. We had some really tricky and difficult conversations with people. We mentioned it earlier about people potentially not being on the right bus. I had concrete examples of, this is just not how we operate in life, let alone with learners. So we got to the point where we made some very, actually, they weren't difficult decisions, but they were painful for the people involved, because we recognised we would not get to where we needed to get to with some of the people who were within the team, and they didn't buy into what we were doing. They didn't get why they had to change, and actually they were doing a disservice to learners, and that shouldn't be allowed to happen anywhere. So we had those really difficult conversations very early on, and I think that actually was the turning point for us, because the rest of the team actually appreciated it and realized we wouldn't put up with that. That was unacceptable. That behavior was not professional. It wasn't what we needed to see. And we were getting feedback from learners and employers sort of telling us that. So it wasn't as if we just came in and plucked it out the air. There was a pattern emerging, but we dealt with it. And I think the fact that we dealt with it, and we dealt with it really quickly, and we weren't afraid to challenge, but we did it in the right way. And again, we go back to that high challenge, low threat. There were other people we were challenging at the same time who were like, thank you for that feedback. We're going to take it on board. We're going to improve things. We didn't realise that was the standard now, They were going on CPD. It was like tough and tender for them. But there were other people who we did just have to be tough. And it had to be the question of learners deserve better. And, being authentic and being transparent and still operating with kindness. But I think it was at that point when the rest of the team said, she means business here. And, there isn't going to be anyone who's just sort of coming along on the journey. Everyone's got a part to play. There's no freeloaders. There's nobody here who's just sort of, plodding along. Everybody had a part to play. And it's still the same now. Today in our team, if you look at our team, it's so diverse, but everybody has a really important part to play. It's not about your leaders. It's not about your directors or your chairs or whoever it might be. It's about your people in your team. They are the people who are front facing. They're the people the learners have more contact with than they do with you. And they are phenomenal. So you get your team right, you get your culture and climate right. They do the job for you, and then it stops being that drag. And I think that was the point where I thought this is going to do really well. And I think, Ranjit, on your point as well, for us, we were going for good because we knew we wouldn't get to outstanding in that short amount of time. But actually, when you look at the Ofsted report and the things in it, we were saying to ourselves, and we didn't deserve a 1, absolutely not. But we got such good feedback that we knew we could be on our onwards to outstanding journey, and that gave us momentum as well. That's our big push now. That's our byline. We're onwards to outstanding, and we will get there because everyone's been in it getting us to the 2, and now they know what the extra push is to get us to a 1. And it's not the same as what it was to get us to a 2 now. It's different, and we've got the team, but they all need to be doing different things now because we've got the foundations. We know what we're doing. Everybody knows what the expectations are, and I'm not there. It runs itself because everyone knows what they're doing. But actually, we're all doing slightly different things now to get to that outstanding grade. And not because it's Ofsted and not because we want the grade or the accolade, it's because it's the right thing to do. So, we're good enough now and we're doing well and everything's fine, but we want to be even better. And that's our philosophy with everything. Everything is even better if. How can this be even better if? We do something, we do it well. That was great, but how can it be even better if? And we say that with everything at all times. And that's really kept us going. And that's stopped us going back into a drag stage. That's kept us all motivated, really.
That's a really good point, actually, because in fact I'm going to save it and come back to that about this idea of how do you keep it consistent, because there's a relentlessness to some of this, isn't there, that can be hard. But I really love, and I've always loved the really simple phrase about, but what would 1% more look like? So we're doing a great job, but what does 1% more look like? Because I think it helps, for some of the guys who are perhaps listening to this today, and I think hopefully feeling reassured that perhaps they're in that place of it feeling a bit chaotic, feeling a bit like you're in the drag, if you like, and that you haven't got people on board, that there is a route through it. There is a route to get to that, but sometimes it can feel like a mountain that you're having to climb, as opposed to, but what would 1% more look like? And building on that until you get to that standard that you guys are setting. Now, Lee, tell me about your worst day. So all of that's great, isn't it? And on the other end of this, and I know there's never another end of it, but you guys are all in a stable place in terms of where you're at, and there's really exciting things happening in all of your organisations. But along the line, you've had some terrible days, I'm sure, because we all have. So if you were picking out one of those worst days, if you like, what did that look like for you, and how did you find your way through that in order to keep going to maintain the momentum of the changes you wanted to make? I guess particularly at Kirkley, and it may even be worth explaining a bit about the Kirkley provision, because there's some extra layers to that give you some other challenges.
Yeah, I mean, Kirkley Hall is a unique campus. It's the most northerly land-based campus in England. It houses all of the specialist land-based provision, uniform public services, and special educational needs. It's got a wide provision from entry one all the way to level six, so it's really diverse. And I think, in answer to your question, Lou, probably when one of my worst days at Kirkley was probably in the very, very early days, and I had a team of exceptionally disengaged individuals who, prior to merger, in their opinion, were not treated very, from a value-based perspective. They weren't valued, they weren't treated well. But then when you look at the experience they had, I had to put a very different lens, because I actually asked the staff the question, please tell me why is this behaviour happening? Why do you not care? And they said, well, why should we care? Why should we care? Because we don't have the resources to do the job. So I think one bit of advice I would learn from myself in terms of, you've got to understand the staff and you've got to listen to the staff, because what the staff are telling you is, in the vast majority of circumstances, that what they believe, it's their lived experience. How you can quickly improve someone's experience at work automatically means they will then improve their own value at work, their own impact at work, and their ability for them to impact the lives of students as well. Because if you get self-satisfaction from work, you absolutely want to then improve the lives of others around you, and you feel valued and you feel appreciated. But I'll go back to an SEN example, and one thing that absolutely drives me is an inclusion and equity. And an organisation is always going to be treated how it treats its most vulnerable and disadvantaged students. And when at Kirkley, when I first started, there were 10 SEN students. They were in a porter cabin. They were taxied in, they were taxied out. There was no inclusion whatsoever. We've now got 80 SEN students embedded entirely in this campus with outstanding outcomes for those young people. That happened because we had to have honest conversations about inclusion and equity. And I thought at some point, am I ever going to get to really truly understand these individuals? How can I help them understand what outstanding looks like for a young person with SEN? And actually, through communication, clarity around what the expectation is. What does good truly look like? What does RI look like? What does outstanding look like for these young people? How we connect with external stakeholders and parents to build up that. So when I look back on my experience and what the 5-year journey that we've been on, that probably was a terrible example that I saw to start with, and I thought, how am I absolutely going to lift this campus and do this? But we've gone from 77% overall achievement to 94% in 5 years. That doesn't happen without the incredible hard work of every single person understanding what that mission looks like. But it is a challenge, and you do have dark days. You've got to lift yourself up, you've got to crack on, you've got to carry on, you've got to regroup, you've got to have trusted people at work to talk to as well, because you need people to talk to when you're facing difficult times.
That's it. Do you know, that's a great point actually about the support for you as leaders. So,
Yeah.
so Ranjit, tell us about that. When you think about the support that you need as a senior leader, which sometimes can feel like a pretty lonely place, in any organisation actually, not just within FE. Where do you get your support from on those days where actually it feels a little bit challenging and you're not making the progress you want to? Who's listening to you, and how do you get that support?
I think it's been different at different points in Hull. So I remember when I first joined, we had an interim principal who'd, Lowell Williams, who'd had 2 grade 4 colleges, took them to an outstanding. We had Leslie Davies on the board. And since then I've had Deborah Gray. So I've been really lucky. I've had 3 phenomenal. And then Rob Lawson's our chair now as well. So I've had 4 people that are at the top of their game. So when I first joined, I think there was a lot of work put into us by Lowell, and all of the challenges that we were going through were probably normalised by the amount of time they were spending with us. And then the exec team I'm in is quite diverse, and we're all pretty much relentless. So in terms of bad days, even when I've given grade 1, it's not good enough. I'm terrible. I'm impatient. I have to display something else to the staff. But it's very much I'm always nitpicking and always wanting things to be better. But then I can do that with the exec team I'm in, with the quality team I lead. Our SMT is quite close now. But at the start, it was literally with our boss, the principal, and there was a lot of coaching went in. And then everything changed again. We had a new principal. But again, the culture since then has really moved. But it's yeah, so I'm lucky. The team that I'm in is where I get most of my comfort by going off and having a rant whenever things aren't going well.
I have to say, I cannot believe that Rob Lawson manages to get a mention on my podcast. You know what I mean? I can't wait to send this to him and say, can you believe it? I can't get away from you. You're still getting a mention. I was very lucky, Ranjit, that when I first, hence how Lee and I know each other, when I first joined the board of EPNE, Rob was the chair. There, so I've had the privilege of working alongside him. He's a great guy, as are the other people that you mentioned there as well. So Sarah, your experience to that is quite different, because actually when you are delivering apprenticeship provision, but the main part of the business does something other than that, and you don't have that natural place, if you like, of colleagues who are working there. What do you do in your circumstance? Because there'll be other ITPs listening to this where they're thinking, but it's only me. You know, I am the only senior leader here. What do you do?
So I think for me, I've got a very strong network in the sector from places that I've worked previously, and you build up relationships with people based on trust. And I know there's go-to people I can ring and say, there's a safeguarding issue. Can you? I just want to run this by you. Does this make sense to you? This is what I'm thinking. So I often sense check myself, but with people outside the business, and doing things like courses, CPD, going to conferences. You meet people. LinkedIn's fantastic. I think that the world of training providers and FE colleges, we share, even though sometimes people are in competition, there is a big collaboration effort, because people want other people to do well, because it impacts on learners. So even when it's naive to say there isn't a competitive element, but actually if everyone improves, it improves everything for everyone. At the end of the day, it's the learners who will get the best outcome. So I find that I use people in the sector, and I've got trusted people who I'll go to and get advice off. And just to put it out there, with Ofsted, it was you that I called, wasn't it? When we got our call, first person I called was Lou. You'll never guess what. So it's nice to have people who you can contact, and you can you get good friends in the sector who will offer support.
I think so too. So I've got 5 steps to quality improvement to ask you all now. So Lee, you go first with step 1. I'm coming in as a new senior quality leader. So that might be a vice principal in a college. It might be a director of quality with an ITP or similar. And we've got to give them a 5-step plan to improvement because things aren't great. What's your step 1 that you would tell them to do as they walk in the door? This is the first thing that I would do if I was in your shoes.
Very first thing you've got to do is take time to observe, because actually you will walk in there with prejudgments. You'll walk in there potentially with people telling you what it's like previously. You've got to observe. You've got to understand the culture. You've got to understand the timing, the balance and the perspective of what you are trying to change. But then what you've also got to do is always do the right thing even when nobody is looking. So what is the reason for change? What are you doing it for? What is the outcome? So understanding what it looks like now, but really truly understanding what it's going to look like is probably the first thing.
Thank you. Who wants second step?
I was going to say data. I think for me, just cleansing the data and finding out. I know it's only one piece of the story, but having a clear oversight of your data, it just gives you ideas of where you need to focus first. Because if you go in, especially as we did, we went in and everything needed fixing. And on those days, you're like, oh goodness, I'm sorting out this hole over here, but actually another one's been created over here. And it's that idea that you can't solve everything straight away. Be kind to yourself and actually say, which is the bit that I need to fix first, that'll have an impact on all the other things as well. But for me, it was definitely oversight of data, because you can work with that. It's concrete, it's fact. So I think I'd definitely tell people to make sure the data is, and also that it's accessible and people can understand it. There's no point just your data person knowing it and giving you reports on it. You need to own your data. You're accountable for it. And you need to understand where it's coming from and why. And again, just sort of have that clear oversight, and then you can make people accountable then for their data.
It's I'll say something before I give Ranjit step number 3. For me, the conversation, if there's a conversation I have on repeat with providers we work with formally or informally, you just pick up the phone. It is what I notice when it feels chaotic and it feels like there's a mountain to climb is there's a tendency to reach for a very long to-do list and try and fix 100 things. And for me, there's such a key leadership piece in there about, but we can only do 5. So actually, if we only do 5, which are the 5 things that will have the most significant impact? And actually, we can't do the other 95 yet because we don't have time, we don't have capacity, and frankly, we'll fall off the edge of a cliff, in our own well-being if we try to do those things. And for me, that's so important. Is panic drives trying to do too much, and it's actually that moment to just take a step back and say we can't do it all in one go. Ranjit, step 3.
Fewer things well.
Yeah,
I think I 100% agree with the first two, but particularly what Lee said about the culture. So you'd have to go and evaluate, then get the data, do your own evaluations, do all your own reviews, and then afterwards it's having a clear plan in place so everybody's really clear on what they need to do and what they don't need to do as well. So that's important because you can't have just loads of headless chicken running around and creating their own reports and doing their own activities based on reports that shouldn't even exist. So I think that plan after it is really, really key. But it's interesting you just said about the chaos and having large quips. Our quips are never longer than 4 to 5 action points as well. Can only change a certain amount of things, and it's very clear. And if anything, I've gone away from being obsessed with quality improvement plans and targets, but just working on simple things, doing the right thing at the right time, pushing the right things, and being clear and simplifying it for people. I mean, to teachers, I always say to them, just they need to teach and they need to mark, and that's it. And that sounds simplistic, but it's that's the key.
no, and I'll come back to that in a moment about whole organisation stuff. Lee, Sarah, would you add a 4th or 5th step in?
I was just going sort of on the back of what Ranjit said about consistency as well, the consistency of message, that this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and this is when it needs to be done by. And then no further information is required then because everyone's got ownership of what the journey is and what their part is to play.
But I think the communication is absolutely key because what are you intending to change? What is the reason why? What is the time scale? Who's involved? And what outcomes are we looking for? And if everybody in that change process doesn't understand that, it will fail.
Yeah.
The bit I was going to come back to that links with your point, Lee, that Ranjit and Sarah have both said is around we focus quite rightly when things aren't going well where it should be focused, which is around the quality of teaching and learning that learners are receiving. And we might have guys here who are listening to this with employability hats on, and the same principle applies around the relationship with job seekers. So you put them at the heart of what you're doing. The bit when I notice that organisations are on a route to success is when they've kind of got that piece to where it needs to be, but then quality improvement becomes a whole organisation activity. So it doesn't matter which part of the organisation you're in, you are absolutely aligned on where it is that we're trying to get to. And where I see the issues coming up quite often is when I can speak to one part of an organisation and their view on where we're trying to go looks different to the people over here. And neither of them are necessarily wrong. It's just they're not trying to get to the same place. I think there's a lot we can learn in FE actually from the employability sector around that they have a more traditional approach, if you like, to continuous improvement, which is more aligned to things like Six Sigma and lean methodology and so on. And equally, employability has a lot to learn from FE in relation to the way that we focus on the activities within the quality of teaching and learning. And it was partly why we pulled the awards together with both of them, because there's a really important crossover that I think if we can get both elements of that right, we've got a long way to go. I'm going to run out of time now because I'll get told off. So I've got one last question for you all, if I may. Lee, you can only be remembered for one thing in your career. What would you want to be remembered for when you decide to retire and live peacefully with your dog?
Well, that's difficult because I think in each organisation I've worked in, I'm proud of a lot of things I've achieved. What I would say collectively in the organisations is my values around equity and inclusion and how we support our most disadvantaged and vulnerable young people, those with SEND, ESOL, asylum seekers, all those vulnerable groups of people that need education and need support and wraparound support to be effective in their lives. That's what I'd like to remember for, the impact I've had on that vulnerable group of young people and adults.
Thank you, Lee. Ranjit, what about for you?
I think mine would be, I'm quite performance driven, so I think it would be around the results. To have had the best results that the institute or the department has ever had when I was there. And I think that's the key for me, making sure that as many students are passing and doing well on the qualifications.
Thank you. Last word, Sarah.
I think for me, being an authentic leader, leading with kindness and keeping people in the sector on spreading the wings in the sector and being absolutely fantastic to improve the outcomes for as many learners as possible. That would be what I'd like to be remembered for.
It's not a bad lot to be remembered for, is it? We're lucky to have you in FE. And Sarah, you need to just hold your award up now. You were meant to just hold it up in front of you.
No, shall I?
She's just so well prepared.
Well.
So well prepared for today. Thank you to all of you for being here. You are an absolute joy, as always, to spend time with, and thank you for being and participating in the awards earlier this year as well. We're delighted to have you there. I hope that you will be back in a different guise in some way, hopefully next year to celebrate the next round of it. So thank you, everyone. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
You both. See you soon. Take care. Bye.